to China to conduct marine scientific research in the Philippine rice. Subsequently, therefore, President Duterte instructed on February 25, 2018, the Department of Foreign Affairs to put on hold all research activities by foreign entities in the Philippine rice until the government has completed its review of the said permits. Accordingly, all permits to conduct research in the Philippine rice by foreign entities shall be reviewed and assessed by the National Security Advisor and approved by the President. In 2019, for the recent developments, when President Duterte visited Batanes, after it was hit by an earthquake, he directed the military, marine law enforcement, and other concerned agencies to conduct enhanced routine patrol, improve airports and seaports, and secure all the islands in the northernmost part of the Philippines' national territory. The President reiterated his directive during the 40th Cabinet meeting on August 5, 2019, and joined the joint AFP-PNP Command Conference on September 5, 2019, to give out more instructions. The National Task Force West Philippine Sea, NTF-WPS, has 16 member agencies, namely the DFA, DND, DOJ, DILG, DENR, DOE, DA Agriculture, DTI, DOTR, DOF, NEDA, National Coast Watch System, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, PNP Maritime Group, Philippine Coast Guard, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, PCOO, and the DOST. It also has close interactions with the University of the Philippines Marine Scientific Institute and National Institute of Geological Sciences. The National Security Advisor serves as the chairman and the National Security Council, Secretariat, provides administrative and technical support to the National Task Force. Structurally, this is the various levels of organization of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. The NTF WPS receives guidance from the President through the Cabinet and Cabinet Cluster on Security, Justice, and Peace. The NTF WPS meets regularly once a week to assess developments and incidents in the West Philippine Sea and Philippine rice. Developments and incidents can be elevated to the Cabinet Security Cluster and before the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. Appropriate committees of the Senate and House of Representatives are also kept informed. The National Task Force, WPS, has two area-level task forces which orchestrate and synchronize the efforts of the different government agencies at the area level. In June 2016, the Executive Secretary directed the Armed Forces of the Philippines through the Western Command and the Northern Luzon Command to create, convene, and lead the area task forces respectively. In terms of geographic scope and area, the Area Task Force North, led by the AFP NOLCOM, covers Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal, the Luzon Strait, Philippine rice, and the adjacent waters of our northern and eastern seaboards in the Philippine Sea. The Area Task Force West, led by the AFP Westcom, covers the Philippine-occupied islands, features, and waters in the Kalayaan Island Group, coastal and littoral areas surrounding Palawan up to the limits of the exclusive economic zone and the Malampaya Natural Gas to Water Project. The West Philippine Sea. Presidential Decree number 1596, dated June 1978, established the municipality of Kalayaan, which is composed of the islands, reefs, and other maritime features of the Kalayaan Island Group. The term West Philippine Sea is defined in Administrative Order number 29, dated September 5, 2012, and covers the area shown on the screen. The West Philippine Sea corresponds to the maritime zones of the Philippines on the western side of the archipelago, including the maritime zones of the high tide features of the Kalayaan Island Group. Let me go to the Kalayaan Island Group, which is under the area of responsibility of the Area Task Force West. The Philippines occupies and maintains outposts in 9 features in the KIG, namely Parola Island, Pag-asa Islands, as it is composed of several cays, sandy cays, Panata Island, Kota Island, Likas Island, Patag Island, Lawak Island, Rizal Reef, and Ayungin Shoal. Meanwhile, this is Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal within the area of responsibility of Area Task Force North. Bajo de Masinloc is a lone coral atoll located on the apex of what appears to be a long dormant underwater volcano. Bajo de Masinloc is 116 nautical miles west of Zambales and 448 nautical miles south of Hainan, China. It received its name, Scarborough, from the British ship HMS Scarborough, a ship that was wrecked there around the time that the British conducted the very first systematic and accurate charting of the South China Sea in 1812. The Philippine rice also, which is also within the area of responsibility of the Area Task Force North, is shown in this slide. On April 12, 2012, the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf validated the Philippines' submission to an extended continental shelf in the Benham or Philippine rice region. The Commission, in essence, affirmed that the Philippines has exclusive sovereign rights to explore and exploit living and non-living resources found in the seabed and subsoil in its extended continental shelf in the Philippine rice region. On May 16, 2017, to assert the Philippines' sovereign rights and jurisdiction over the area, President Duterte renamed Benham Rice to Philippine Rice through Executive Order number 75. So now, in addition to the 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, the Philippines has 150 nautical miles of extended continental shelf. The Philippine rice comprises 24.9 million hectares. 11.4 million hectares are our continental shelf inside our EEZ, and 13.5 million hectares are our extended continental shelf. On marine scientific research, on May 15 to 16, 2018, President Duterte graced a series of commemorative activities for the Philippine rice, and many firsts were achieved. It was the first offshore maritime event of the President and the first largest coordinated multi-agency and multi-spectrum event that featured the country's marine scientific research. Aboard BRP Davao del Sur in Casiguran Bay, Aurora Province, President Duterte brought together and sent off the country's best scientists, led by the University of the Philippines and other government research institutions, to an all-Filipino marine scientific research to the Philippine rice. And this was the message, the keynote address, and the keynote and sent-off message to the President, to the scientists. I have complete faith in the capabilities of our world-class scientists, and I recognize the need to provide them with the necessary means to fulfill your mandate. Siguro, tig-isang barko. Tig-isang barko talaga. Further, President Duterte signed Proclamation number 489, which established the Philippine Rice Marine Resource Reserve. This marine reserve has two zones. One for strict protection zone with an area of 49,684 hectares, limited to scientific studies, and a special fisheries management area with an area of 302,700 hectares for the sustainable development and regulated utilization of resources. Finally, let me go to the policy directives of the President as the last part of my presentation. Number one, investing on credible defense posture, modernization of land, air, including unmanned deployments, sea, surface and undersea, space, including satellites and radars, and cyber capabilities. Note that the Philippine expenditures for defense have gone down from a high point of 2.71 of gross national domestic product in 1980 to only 0.96 in 2019. And we will allocate more to defense spending. Number two, strengthening maritime law enforcement capabilities. We have the new procurements. Number three, upgrading of facilities in all Philippine-occupied maritime areas and features. Take note that we now have a harbor, safe harbor in Pag-asa Island, and a beaching ramp, which will lead to the repair of our airstrip in Pag-asa Island. Number four, improving the welfare of the community, such as the residents in the municipality of Kalayaan, Palawan, and island communities in our northern seaboard. Number five, combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Number six, conducting robust marine scientific research, including the acquisition of marine scientific research vessels for our National Academic Research Fleet to be operated by the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute and National Institute of Geological Sciences. They are acquiring 4 research vessels. Number seven, upholding marine environment protection, conservation, and sustainable development and exploitation of our marine resources. 8, promoting oil and gas exploration and development. This is very important for us to enjoy the bounties of the seabed. of our exclusive economic zone. Number 9, securing and developing our islands, including the Philippine Rise and adjacent waters of our northern and eastern seaboards in the Philippine Sea. Strengthening bilateral regional engagements and other confidence-building measures and mechanisms with our regional partners and other allies. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I end my briefing. I hope we have introduced to you, as you wanted, the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea and the ongoing activities in our maritime domains. I hope you have appreciated well the current policy directives of the President. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Secretary Esperon. Ang susunod na magbibigay naman ng kanyang presentation at opening statement ay si Deputy Administrator Efren Carandang of NAMRIA. Sir?
Thank you, ASEC JV. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Secretary Esperon. Magandang umaga po sa ating mga kababayan who are watching on TV and online, and members of the press who are joining us today. On behalf of the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, I will discuss the maritime areas in the West Philippine Sea, or WPS, where the Republic of the Philippines exercises sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction. My briefing will cover the geographical scope of the WPS, including the different maritime areas. I will also discuss the coordinated activities being undertaken by the different government agencies, the processes that influence the fish productivity in the area, and the oil and gas resources. The West Philippine Sea comprises the maritime areas on the western side of the Philippine archipelago. Can you show the slide, please? These areas include the Luzon Sea. Next slide, please. As well as the waters around, within, and adjacent to the Kalayaan Island Group and Bajo de Masinloc, which is also known as the Scarborough Shoal. The following slides illustrate the different maritime zones in the WPS according to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. From the archipelagic baselines of the main archipelago, there is the 12 nautical mile territorial sea where the state exercises sovereign powers. Then there is another 12 nautical mile belt comprising the contiguous zone where the state exercises certain enforcement jurisdiction with respect to customs, fiscal, immigration, and sanitary laws and regulations. Next is the exclusive economic zone extending 200 nautical miles from the same baselines, where the state enjoys sovereign rights or exclusive economic rights. The EEZ pertains to the water column only. About 2/3 of the Kalayaan Island Group lie within the EEZ, where there are several high tide features or rocks, as the 2016 Arbitral Award classified them. Bajo de Masinloc, composed of several rocks, is also located within this EEZ. These rocks are territories in themselves and entitled to their respective 12 nautical mile territorial seas, while the low tide features, or those features that are exposed during low tide but submerged during high tide, are also entitled to a territorial sea if they are located wholly or partly within 12 nautical miles of a high tide feature. Beneath the EEZ is the legal continental shelf, comprising the seabed and subsoil, where the state likewise enjoys sovereign economic rights. Low tide elevations within the area, such as the Panganiban Reef or Mischief Reef, and the Yumin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal, and the fully submerged features like Rectobank or Reed Bank form part of this continental shelf. Now, about 1/3 of the Calayan Island Group is located beyond 200 nautical miles from the main island of Palawan. This is where the Philippine held features of Pag-asa Islands, which includes the surrounding cays and reefs, Parola, Kota, and Panata are located. This, along with other high tide features within the Calayan Island Group, have the respective 12 nautical mile territorial seas. They all form part of the municipality of Palawan. Presently, the Philippines occupies 9 features in the Calayan Island Group. The rest of the features are either occupied by other claimant states or presently unoccupied, but not all of them are represented in this map. Finally, we have an extended continental shelf in the western Palawan region. It is located beyond the EEZ within the seabed area that we call the ECS corridor. An interagency group being led by NAMRIA, or the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, is collecting, assembling technical and scientific data in support of a future submission to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, which is the same UN body where we made our submission for the Philippine rice or Benham rice in 2009. The ECS will also form part of the maritime domains of the West Philippine Sea. Just recently, the Sangguniang Bayan ng Kalayaan passed Ordinance Number 50-2020, naming the 4 sandbars located west of Pag-asa Island as Pag-asa K1, Pag-asa K2, Pag-asa K3, and Pag-asa K4. The ordinance also named the reefs located east of the island as Pag-asa Reef 1 and Pag-asa Reef 2. The Pag-asa Island, the 4 cays to the west and the 2 reefs to the east, form an island chain which we now collectively call the Pag-asa Islands. Now, let me discuss the activities of the different government agencies in the WPS, starting off with marine scientific research. In 2017, the National Coast Watch Council initiated a program entitled Coordinated National Marine Scientific Research Initiatives and Related Activities in Philippine Waters, or CONMIRA. Since then, different agencies of the government have been conducting coordinated marine scientific research in the WPS, the Philippine rice, and other parts of our EEZ. You will recall that in 2018, the President suspended the conduct of marine scientific research by foreign entities in Philippine waters and tasked the National Security Advisor and Chair of the NTF WPS, Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr., to review all such applications from foreign entities. At the same time, Secretary Esperon tapped the working mechanism under the NTF WPS to harmonize all government-funded MSRs and assisted the relevant agencies in securing additional funds for their marine research activities. As presented earlier, the all-Filipino MSR to the Philippine rice in May 2018 became CONMIRA's milestone activity, where the Philippine rice was declared by the President as a marine resource reserve. Now, on the marine ecosystems in the WPS, the DENR, Biodiversity Management Bureau, reported that the coral reefs in the WPS cover an estimated area of 600 to 1,000 square kilometers, or about 30% of the total reef area of the country. The KIG and neighboring Palawan are major fishing grounds for thousands of Filipino fishermen, contributing to food security and livelihood of the coastal communities. However, the area is threatened by illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUUF, as well as unsustainable practices. Now, in terms of productivity, a BMB study shows that there is connectivity between the reefs of the WPS and the reefs on the western coasts of the country, with the connection extending all the way to the Sulu Sea. During northeast monsoon or amihan, coral reefs, coral and fish larvae are transported by ocean currents from the main archipelago to the WPS. The opposite happens during southwest monsoon or habagat, when the coral and fish larvae from WPS are transported to the main archipelago. These natural processes demonstrate the interdependence between the two marine ecosystems. The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, DABFAR, reports that the WPS serves as fishing grounds for a total of 294,730 fisherfolk coming from regions 1, 3, NCR, 4A, and Mimaropa. The country's total fisheries production in 2019 is 4,415,2 metric tons, and the WPS accounts for only 323,684 metric tons, or 7.33% of the total fish production. To increase the catch of our fishermen in the WPS, the DABFAR has been installing fish aggregating devices, or payaws, in strategic locations. These payaws attract tuna and other fishes, which translates to reduced time for searching and catching fish. On petroleum resources, based on the available data from the sedimentary basins of Northwest Palawan, Southwest Palawan, and Recto Bank, the Department of Energy estimates that the West Philippine Sea could potentially hold a deposit of about 6,048 million barrels of undiscovered oil and 7,108 billion cubic feet of undiscovered gas. For oil resources, the estimated discovered resource is about 155 million barrels, while the estimated recoverable resource is about 96 million barrels. As of June 2020, the total oil produced from these three basins amount to 79 million barrels. For gas, the estimated discovered resource is about 5,050 billion cubic feet, while the estimated recoverable resource is 3,221 billion cubic feet. As of June 2020, the total gas produced from these three basins amount to 2,318 billion cubic feet. Now, in summary, the West Philippine Sea is a vital part of our maritime domain. It is rightly the Philippines' maritime entitlements under UNCLOS found in the western seaboard of the Philippine archipelago. The area is endowed with still undetermined and untapped natural resources. The government is coordinating the efforts of different agencies, upgrading its marine scientific research fleet, supporting local fishermen and marine scientists, and employing all possible means to protect this vital part of the national patrimony while ensuring the safety of its citizens. This ends my briefing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, DA Efren Carandang. Before we proceed to the Q&A session, a couple of mechanics muna para sa media bago tayo magsimula sa ating Q&A.
For the Q&A portion. 1. Make sure that you join the Zoom meeting room with your name and the name of your media outlet. 2. Questions sent in advance by the media will be read in order of submission. 3. To ask a question live, you may click the raise hand button or notify me through the Zoom Q&A chat box. I will then call your attention when it's your turn to speak. 4. Please state your name and media outlet before asking your question and say to whom your questions are directed to. 5. To make way for other participants, the media participant may initially ask 2 to 3 questions. You will be allowed to ask more questions later on if time permits. 6. We encourage our media participants to please only limit your questions related to the topic.
All right. Now the floor is now open for the question and answer session. Our first question will come from Lip Wang of Guangming Daily, China. Lip,
Good morning, Isaac Javi. Good morning, sir. My question goes to Secretary Espero. What do you think of the COC, the Code of Conduct? Do you think it will be finished by next year as scheduled? And what will the National Task Force for West Philippine Sea do to push it forward? Thank you.
Well, right now,
yes, sir.
we have the Declaration of Conduct of Participants in the West Philippine Sea. That is the governing declaration and agreement amongst states that are in the South China Sea. We are moving towards the Code of Conduct in our talks with China, and the ASEAN side is led by no less than the Philippines. We have already a single draft on the agreements, and we still hope that by 2021 we could sign a final agreement on the Code of Conduct, and this will govern in a more orderly and more peaceful, more inclusive activities in the South China Sea. We are very positive about it. The talks are ongoing.
Thank you, sir. Lip, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. Do you think the ongoing U.S. election will have something to affect the situation on the South China Sea? Thank you.
I would imagine the ongoing elections itself does not have an effect on the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. But the outcome of the elections certainly will have effects in the South China Sea. If we have a re-elected president, then there will be a continuation of the current activities of the United States insofar as going for freedom of navigation and overflights are concerned. If we will have a new president, there will be some revisions of policies perhaps. But then this is beyond us right now, as these are purely speculative. Let us remember that whoever is the head of state of the United States, we will deal with him, our president will deal with him as he does now, and as he does with other heads of state. So probably we'll just have to wait for a while and to be more definitive in our answers regarding our relations with the United States. But we certainly hope that the elections will be completed in the right time, in their own rules and regulations.
Thank you, Lip Wang of Guangming
Thank you so much.
Daily.
Thank you.
Again, remind ko lang, please limit your questions na related to our topic only. Okay, sir, June or DA Karandang, what is the importance of the presentation and protection of our maritime area in the long-term plan of the Philippine government?
I would answer that, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As presented by Secretary Esperon earlier, fish and other aquatic resources are a staple of the Filipino diet. It feeds our citizens, and not only us, but also the other citizens of the other countries surrounding the South China Sea. So it is an imperative for us really to protect the the health, the biodiversity, the ecosystem services that the maritime areas of the West Philippine Sea provides. As I have shown earlier, there is an connectivity between the health of the marine ecosystem in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea with that of our main archipelago. So it behooves the government, really, the state, to do its best, all the means to protect, conserve our marine resources.
We must remember that our land area of more than 300,000 square kilometers is only 1/7 of our maritime domain. And you can just imagine the wealth that goes with that 210 million, 2.1 million square kilometers of maritime domain, including fisheries, as well as minerals and other natural resources that are found in the seabed, among which is natural gas, oil, and coral reefs and other riches of the seas. Therefore, it is just right that we put much effort into protecting this maritime domain because it serves the people. It is also a buffer zone for our country, and definitely it is a source of a lot of resources. A lot of nandyan ang ating kayamanan na napakalaki.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Sec June. Next question, June Caniete of TechCast Media from Hong Kong.
Hi,
June, good morning.
good morning. Good morning, Secretary Esperon, Deputy Administrator Karandang, and ASEC JBO. I think my question is directed to Secretary Esperon. You may have mentioned this already in your presentation, but I just like to have a more summary, clarification on this one. What are the current actions undertaken by the Philippine government in protecting or asserting our sovereignty and sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, first, we have 9 islands and reefs that we occupy in the West Philippine Sea. The biggest of which is Pag-asa Islands. Islands because it is composed of 4 sandy cays above water level and 2 reefs, which were named recently by the Kalayaan municipality to be Pag-asa Islands. We are certainly taking care of that biggest island as well as the others by improving our positions there. We now have an excellent safe harbor in Pag-asa Island, and we are about to repair our 1.2 kilometer airstrip in Pag-asa Island. We are also improving the communications in those islands, as well as putting in the necessary markers, lighthouses, and many other things that our troops and our residents need in the area. It is very important that to note that we have the Area Task Force West and the Area Task Force North that are actually led by the Armed Forces of the Philippines, NOLCOM and WESCOM. And therefore, all assets of the military, especially the Navy and the Air Force, and even of the Army and the Marine Corps, could be deployed in the area to protect not only our territory, but to provide safety for our fisher folks who are in the coastal areas. Rest assured that your National Task Force West Philippine Sea are looking into all of this, and we are adopting a whole of nation approach into the development and the protection of the West Philippine Sea, and the whole government is indeed putting in resources in the area as we need. Meantime, our relations with the neighboring states as well as with other countries that come into the South China Sea are taken care of by our diplomatic relations. And so the treatment of what we have in the West Philippine Sea and the South China Sea are addressed in the different fora, not only in the ASEAN, but also with its um, with its regional partners, to include Japan, Korea, India, Australia, and the United States. So you can be assured that the necessary attention is put into the West Philippine Sea as well as in the Philippine Rise.
June?
Thank you, Secretary Esperon. If I may have a follow-up question.
Go
Now
ahead,
that
sir.
you mentioned about diplomacy, what impact or effects do the Philippines' diplomatic profiles have on China's action in the West Philippine Sea?
Can you repeat that? What
Oh,
impact?
okay. What effect do the Philippines' diplomatic profiles have on China's actions in the West Philippine Sea? Because, in the previous years and months, there have been a lot of activities from the side of China in terms of claiming the territory. So what impact do you think this has on our
Well,
diplomatic profile?
overall, it strengthened our assertion of our sovereignty and sovereign rights within the boundaries of the EEZ, as well as within the limits of the Calayan Island Group. In our weekly meetings at the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, we evaluate incidents and developments, and if necessary, we recommend for diplomatic action and protest. On its own, the Department of Foreign Affairs can also take of course, diplomatic action, and this has been continuing. But it is not only in terms of diplomatic protest or actions that we address our relations with other countries. Specifically with China, we have our bilateral consultative mechanism, which was put up right after the state visit of the president to China. And this consultative mechanism has provided a venue or forum for us to trace out the issues at hand. And as I have said, aside from the BCM that is continuing every 6 months, or even earlier, as if deemed necessary, we have the ongoing talks on the code of conduct. We believe that because of these mechanisms and diplomatic actions, we have come to a point where there is better understanding of the nature of the issues, that while we agree to disagree on sovereignty and sovereign rights, there is still so much room for relations with all countries, including China. For after all, for China, for example, our relations with them does not start and end with the South China Sea. We have other relations with them in the field of diplomacy, trade, economics, cultural, and information exchange. And so at this point, I must say that we have put in place a system that allows us to interact in a more orderly manner with our neighboring countries, but more importantly with China. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it was better than before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, June Caniete of TechCast Media Hong Kong. Sir, we have a phone-in question from Jonah Giolagon of Asahi Shimbun, a Japanese newspaper. Please describe the situation on the ground. How many foreign ships are in the Philippines or the Philippine claimed area on average? Before the monsoon season began, were Filipino fishermen able to freely go to the area and stay as long as they needed?
Foreign vessels. Let us be conscious of the fact that after China reclaimed several islands that featured the 3 airstrips in Sobi Reef or Samora, Fiery Cross, and Mischief Reef. These were also put up with harbors that could accommodate big ships or big vessels. And so in terms of positioning in the area, they have been there since that time that they have completed these structures on airports, harbors, and living areas. And therefore, we see that in Subi, Fiery Cross, and Mischief primarily, they can station naval ships from the PLA, as well as many bigger ships from the Chinese Coast Guard. And these have also become the shelter of Chinese fishing vessels. Some would call it Chinese maritime militias. And so they are there, but we have not been lacking also in projecting our forces. There had been instances where there were almost 21 fishing vessels around Pag-asa Islands, but today there are only 7. And they have maintained Coast Guard presence in Scarborough with several Chinese fishing vessels. But our fishermen, over time, have also been fishing in the area already, including going inside the Scarborough with the smaller ships. Otherwise, we have our payaos that were put up by the Bureau of Fisheries as fish gathering devices, where our fishermen could fish. So you will also note that there are several Vietnamese fishing vessels all over because these are traditional fishing grounds. But our common drive now is to have more of our own fishermen and bigger fishing vessels. Deputy Administrator Karandang here reported that only 7.3% of our fishing production comes from the West Philippine Sea. And it is the richest fishing ground in this part of the world. It's practically it's very rich, and we are getting so little from it. We must go for it at least as it could contribute to a big, how much is that? The blue economy that we are looking at. That should give us a lot of more financial muscle if we could exploit the West Philippine Sea. And so to be able to do that, we should also strengthen our Coast Guard and have better fishing vessels.
Okay, sir. Her second question is, now that the research activity is again allowed in the West Philippine Sea, what sort of protection can the Philippine government provide scientific vessels that will be going around the area? How would you describe the demeanor of the Chinese government vessels toward Philippine ships or boats?
Certainly, if foreign marine research institutions are allowed to conduct MSR within our waters, there are safeguards that are put in place by our Department of Foreign Affairs. They have to be boarded by Filipino scientists. They have to share the data, not just the processed data, but also the raw data with us. So there are a lot of conditions. So that safeguards, that assures us that the MSR is being conducted only for MSR purposes. Now, for Filipino scientists, our expeditions are always being monitored closely by our law enforcement agencies. So that's why right now, weather permitting, we are always free to go there and conduct our own MSR expeditions.
Okay.
We are happy to report that through the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, funds have been provided for the procurement of 4 maritime research vessels by the UP Marine Science Institute. And so we will see more deployments from our scientists in the West Philippine Sea, which could lead to better knowledge of the area, including fisheries and what could be found in the seabeds. It is very important that we have our own MSRs. We already have 3, one in the Navy, one in the ANR, and one in the fisheries, 2 in the NAMRIA. And so this is the way to go. We should know what we have and exploit them with care, of course. And if necessary, in partnership with the whole world. After all, the UNCLOS itself dictates that we take care of the fisheries, nurture it, and if necessary, to share it with other countries who need more fish. And so the idea is for us to have better controls of fishing in our within our EEZ, so that we could optimize our benefits from the fishing industry. We are looking at a vigorous, robust blue economy.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will come from Japan, from Joho Royce Shiroma of Filipina Shimbun from Tokyo. Good morning, Royce.
Good morning, sir.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear me?
Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Apo. I have a question to Namaria Deputy Administrator Karandang. There are proposals for parts of the WPS to become maritime protected areas under the National Integrated Protected Area System. So my question is, what kind of management is required of the Philippine government given the multiple issues surrounding accessibility of the area?
Thank you. Certainly, we are proposing, in fact, certain areas, specific areas to be declared as marine protected areas. There are several types of management regimes that we are looking into depending on the location and depending on the situation on the ground. So we will start with the areas that we hold, that we can control, but this does not stop us from also opening our channels of communication with the other claimant states, which we also encourage to do the same. This is an activity that is benign activity that is bereft of any sovereignty claims, purely for marine scientific purposes. And the end goal really is to establish a network of marine protected areas in the whole of the South China Sea. But we will start with our own, building on the experience that we have in establishing and managing marine protected areas in other parts of the country. Yeah, in Rice and in other parts of the country.
Can I have one more question? What do you think are the benefits of having maritime protected areas in the WPS?
Certainly, we need to conserve the biodiversity in the area. There are threats. We have IUUF, we have unsustainable fishing practices, we have land reclamations which destroy the coral reefs. So we need to restore these ecosystems in order to bring back the productivity of the area, and at the same time also influence the productivity in other areas. Just like what I presented before, there is connectivity between the productivity of the West Philippine Sea and the main archipelago of the Philippines. But not only that, also in other parts of the coastal parts of the West Philippine Sea and the South China Sea.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Royce from Tokyo, Japan. Kaugnay po sa topic na yun, sir, no? We have a question from Chino Gaston of GMA 7 for DA Carandang, you mentioned unsustainable and destructive practices in the West Philippine Sea. Is this done by China, Vietnam, or Filipinos? If so, are we going to elevate this complaint to a higher international body as a violation of a marine protected area? What are our options since we cannot enforce against other nations?
Right now we are documenting incidents of destruction and unsustainable fishing practices, not only by China but also by Vietnam. And we are documenting all of this, but we are raising these issues bilaterally for now.
Mm-mm. Yes, sir. Another question from Chino. Pwede po magpatanong if the government is totally ruling out the joint patrol with the US or China or other countries as part of securing the territories, sir?
If you are referring to joint exercises, you have put them on hold. After all, if we are to conduct joint exercises or joint patrol exercises, we can do it within our territorial waters or in areas where we have enough maneuver area, like the Sulu Sea, or even at the side of the Philippine Sea. For now, we have put them on hold for several reasons, but we will consider them again as the situation develops. For now, we think that getting into military exercises in the area don't contribute much to a peaceful South China Sea or West Philippine Sea. We will evaluate that. We will continue to evaluate that, however.
Thank you, sir. Our next question will come from Melo Acuna of the Asia Pacific Daily. Melo, good morning.
Good morning, Assistant Secretary Arcena, and good morning to Secretary June Esperon. My questions are for you. How long does it take for the task force to evaluate initial reports, either from the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine National Police, or Philippine Coast Guard, and come up with the appropriate action by the Department of Foreign Affairs? Because the Department of Foreign Affairs has filed several diplomatic protests on several maritime incidents. Secretary June Esperon, please.
Well, first of all, Melo, good morning to you
Good
and
morning.
our friends. The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea meets every Tuesday, or sometimes maybe Wednesday, but we see to it that we meet every week. Therefore, the time frame for actions would be within that period. Whether it is a weekday or a weekend, we can always act on matters that come to our attention. Remember that our organization includes the NOLCOM, AP NOLCOM, and WESCOM, which actually lead the Area Task Force North and the Area Task Force West.
Yes.
And so we have 24/7 coverage of the whole area of responsibility. And our operation centers are, of course, on 24/7 duty also. And as you may know, the advent of better technology that brings you Viber and WhatsApp and internet itself simply gives us faster time, faster reaction on such things. Whether there is a written report or not, if we see that we need to lodge immediately political action, then we will do it within the week. And as soon as verifications have come in, remember that verifying something within the West Philippine Sea can be done not only by our maritime patrols, by Philippine Air Force aircraft or Navy aircraft also, but also by our Coast Guard and our assets that are already in the area. So I must say we can do it within the day, Melo. If we have to put in some, besides, Secretary Locsin can always call the ambassador or his counterparts. We leave that to him in terms of dealing with foreign countries. But the matter of having maritime awareness and deployments in the West Philippine Sea as well as in the other parts of our domain are left to our national task force,
Yes.
which
Thank you very much.
includes military as well as civilian agencies.
Yes. Thank you, Secretary. Let me ask you another question. What guidance have you provided the armed forces of the Philippines, particularly the Philippine Navy, to prevent any untoward armed conflict? Because there are other navies or Coast Guard elements or militias within the South China Sea. What guidance have you provided them to avoid any untoward incident?
Melo?
Secretary, yes.
Melo?
I think we
Yes.
lost signal. You lost signal, Melo.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Ayusin muna natin yung signal ni
Yes,
Melo.
Secretary,
Okay,
can you now hear
habang
me?
wala pa yung susunod na tanong, balikan na lang natin si Melo, no? Okay, we have a
Yeah.
phone-in question from Celerino Monte of Manila Shimbun. If possible, sir, I think this is for Secretary Esperon. If possible, please ask how soon can the government purchase
University of the Philippines Marine Scientific Institute, Marine Science Institute. But as I said, we already have research vessels from the NAMRIA, from the Philippine Navy, as well as the Bureau of Fisheries.
Okay, sir. Our next question, mula naman kay Jillian Cortez of Business World. When will the government submit its documents to the UNCLOS defining the Philippines' claim on the West Philippine Sea? According to some international studies...
To the United Nations.
Yes, sir.
To UNCLOS, sir.
According to some international studies experts, the Philippines has done this for other waters. It has claim on, but not yet with the West Philippine Sea.
I think Jillian is referring to our submission for an extended continental shelf. Yes, we have been preparing for another submission, this time in the Western Palawan region. And we have actually signified this when we responded to the Malaysian submission in December 2019. Yes, we are making preparations and we will be submitting it to the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf at the proper time.
Thank you, sir. Okay na ba si Melo?
Yeah.
Melo, for
Yes.
your last question.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Arsena. For Secretary June Esperon, what guidance have you provided the armed forces of the Philippines, particularly the Philippine Navy, to prevent any untoward incident within the South China Sea, considering the presence of different navies, militias, Coast Guard? What guidance have you given them to prevent such untoward incident? Secretary June, please.
We have a well-established, long-established Navy, and they have protocols and rules of engagements. The same for the Philippine Air Force and the Coast Guard. We just came up with the manual of the Philippine Coast Guard, a new one. And so it is in these manuals and rules of engagement that guidances are given. What I can tell you is that we will not fire the first shot. Anyway. And in our daily patrols, we have also our rules on responses and challenges to vessels and aircrafts that would come in within our EEZ. Certainly, we are asserting our sovereign rights over our EEZ, and so you can rest assured that our manuals, that our Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard have very well established rules on this. They know what to do. And they report very promptly on the developments on the ground or at sea, as I must say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Secretary. I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sir Melo. Tanong naman wala kay Martin Sadongdong of Manila Bulletin. How does the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea view the recent actions of the Quad Group, US, Japan, India, and Australia, to counter China's moves in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, the Quad group is composed of the United States, Australia, India, and Japan.
Yes, sir.
They are they hold to the policy of a free and open Indo-Pacific, meaning the combination of the Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific, in the middle of which is the South China Sea. We certainly agree with the principle of free and open Indo-Pacific oceans. And that is also what we have in the South China Sea. We believe that the South China Sea, which carries about 5 trillion value of trade for many nations, should be open, peaceful, inclusive, meaning nobody should be excluded there. All countries that can trade and want to navigate to the area should be included. There must be rules-based, and it must result to the prosperity of all nations that are located in the area. We abide by those principles. And so we would like to thank them also for their support of of the arbitral award, which was given to us, which we won, which the president has, of course, pronounced to be beyond the manipulations of passing governments, not subject to revisions or abandonment. So if the Quad countries are for that, which they are, for a free and open Indo-Pacific, then certainly we support them.
Thank you, sir. Ang susunod na magtatanong ay si Noela or Ella Madge of the National Public Radio.
Hi, sirs. Good morning.
Ella, good morning.
Yes, hi. Sir, for Secretary Esperon, sir, a few weeks ago, we have the Philippine Navy saying that we will be deploying Filipino fishermen as our militia. Question is, are our Filipino fishermen ready, and are we arming them?
Oh, well, the idea of fishermen being militias had been put in use. My two undersecretaries who are from the Navy have been commanders in the naval forces that have used militias or bantay bayan for particular missions, bantay dagat, to protect the sea, but within definitely territorial waters that are not in dispute, that are not disputed by others. We must admit that we know that the Chinese government has been deploying Chinese maritime militias that are under the control of its Coast Guard, and we know that they are in the South China Sea and in the West Philippine Sea. They are very well equipped. They have bigger ships, I must say. Sometimes they are deployed in around Pag-asa Island, and they're just doing minimal fishing. They're just there because Subi Reef is only 16 nautical miles from Pag-asa Island, and Subi Reef provides them shelter. So the use of maritime militias is very well known, but today, insofar as West Philippine Sea, we have not finalized any plans for the deployment of our fishermen as militias. For several reasons. One among which is we might have to train them so that there will be no actions that could be misconstrued or be the source of miscalculations. Two, so that they will be better protected. And so also, we want them not as militias, We want them as good fishermen because as D.A. Karandang has said, we only get out of our total fisheries cuts of 100%, we get only 7.3 from the West Philippine Sea. Why allow that to continue? So we might as well have more fishermen going to the West Philippine Sea as fishermen and leave the control and the provision of safety and safety at sea to the Coast Guard, and if necessary, to deploy the Navy and the Philippine Air Force for matters that are meant to protect our sovereignty. Let us not put their weak forces. I would have a preference for well-trained forces that are better equipped, rather than ragtag fishermen who would go there. If we have to put in their people, then we might as well equip our fishermen for a good purpose, which is catching fish and protect the environment. We could use them to protect our environment. And so I'd like to see the plan first of the militia deployment there, but for now, we don't have it in the West Philippine Sea.
Thank you, sir.
We have Bantay Dagat in our coastal areas.
Ella?
Okay, sir, yes. Another question though. What is happening in our eastern seaboard at the moment? We know that China has increasing presence there as well. They've named features there with Chinese names. So what is the task force doing on that side?
Well, if I may answer that, Ella. Regarding the naming, the Philippines has also named a number of features, and in fact, these were accepted and approved by the IHO's Special Committee on Undersea Feature Names, and we are continuing to do so. It's only a few, around 4 Chinese names that were accepted, and that was before. But right now, the SCOFEN, the committee that is tasked to review, accept, and evaluate all these name submissions, now know that the Philippines is asserting its rights to name the features in this area. So annually, we are making our submissions, and I do not have the exact number, but we have quite a number of names that were Filipino names that were already approved for the Eastern Seaboard. Regarding the conduct of the MSR of the Chinese vessels, I think they are being conducted far offshore in the Pacific, well into the Pacific Ocean, and not really near the Philippine shores.
Thank you, Ella Madge of the National Public Radio. Our last live question will come from Pia Ranyada of Rappler. Pia?
Yeah, for June 1st, sir, how is the National Task Force preparing for the development of service contracts in the West Philippine Sea, given that the President has just lifted the moratorium? I mean, in what ways are we preparing, and how soon does the National Task Force expect the licensees to be going to the West Philippine Sea or sending ships there?
Well, we have the Memorandum of Understanding with China in 2018, which we would like to hold on to, among others, when we deploy our platforms to the Malampaya as well as to the Reed Bank. The Department of Energy has been designated by the National Task Force West Philippine Sea to be the leader of the task group on matters of giving administrative and operational control to all the platforms that are in the area. It's a civilian-led task group led by the Department of Energy. Nonetheless, we have also the task group that comes as a matter of as a matter of policy and contingency whenever we have important activities in the area, and that is led by the military, by the Westcom, and we are while this is separate from the task group for Recto Bank and Malampaya, task group energy, we call it task group energy. It can always call on the task group that is created by Westcom for security purposes. It should not be that we deploy first our military assets there. We want the platforms, commercial platforms, to be deployed first in the area, but the military will be on standby.
But sir, how about for exploration ships? Because they may not be putting up platforms yet, but these companies might want to explore. And does the task force then will you deploy ships to protect them? And how soon do you expect these ships to start going there? Like by the end of the year, can we expect certain service contractors to be sending such ships? And are we planning to talk to China about these activities? Because I heard unofficials say that that was one of the options fielded, that we first approached China to talk about these possible activities.
As to the question of how soon we will deploy to the area, please remember that our ships are already deployed with the Westcom and under the control of Westcom, and they are in the area. And so if there are exigencies and contingencies that have to be addressed, then we can tap them as part of the task group controlled by the military in the area. The task group energy, which is led by Department of Energy, will be the entity that will take care of the deployment of platforms and in the preparations for the exploration in the area. China will always come into the area, and we have taken measures to see to it that it will be on the basis of the MOU that we signed in 2018. And our continuing engagements with China, including the visit of Secretary Locsin to China last October 11, I think, after the UN General Assembly, is part of the overall efforts in exercising our instruments of national power, including diplomatic, informational, military, economic, to see to it that we benefit from the bounties of our seabeds and continental shelf. So we are confident that the exploration will push through, and we hope that these explorations will result into production by something like 2024 or 2025. Our Malampaya deposits are fast getting depleted. As we all know, the Malampaya provides 30% of our energy. It provides through the pipelines natural gas that will fuel our power plants in Batangas. And they are fast getting depleted. What we want to do is to have additional fields for natural gas and oil when finally Malampaya goes out of operations.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Pia Ranyada of Rappler. Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, that was the last question that we have time for. Do you have any closing statements or remarks or message before ending this virtual presser?
Well, one of the objectives of this press conference is to reintroduce to you the National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea. And at this point, we want to assure our countrymen that 24/7, you have the National Task Force West Philippine Sea that is guarding or keeping track of what is happening in the West Philippine Sea, in the Philippine Rise, and the Philippine Sea. We have our deployments there in the West Philippine Sea, including our biggest detachment in Pag-asa Islands. And certainly we are improving those positions. Meantime, the capabilities capability development must continue, not only with the armed forces, but also with the Philippine Coast Guard, the Philippine National Police, and the Bureau of Fisheries, as well as the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, who we see will be one of the key players here, as it will be our administrator of several marine protected areas in the West Philippine Sea. Through this press con, we have also shown to you the capabilities that we can, the capabilities or the tasks that we can do. Let us remember that the National Task Force West Philippine Sea works under the Office of the President and gets directions from the Cabinet Cluster for Security, Justice, and Peace. And we work. We have all the agencies that are concerned with our domains, and so you can rest assured that our resources, which we have said to be 2.1 square kilometers maritime domain, are taken care of within our capabilities.
Thank you, Sec June. Deputy Administrator Karandang.
Yes, as we have been saying, our stakes for the living and non-living resources in the West Philippine Sea are high. The vast sea, as well as its seabed, are key to our food and energy security. The health of the marine ecosystem in the West Philippine Sea affects the health and productivity of the coastal waters of the main archipelago. The waters of the West Philippine Sea also serve as a maritime highway through which our goods, our merchandise, and the merchandise of national patrimony and jurisdiction in sea, our government is always guided by the rule of law. We claim our maritime entitlements and exercise our maritime obligations in accordance with international law. Even in the present disputes, engage and maintain with our neighbors under the for regional and international cooperation. Maybe we strive to promote
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and to all of the journalists for participating and for your questions. We will provide the transcript as soon as it is available. If you would like to receive any of these products as you haven't already RSVP'd, please send an email to pcooglobalmedia@pco.gov.ph. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for more updates about the Duterte administration and the PCOO. Thank you again for your participation. Until the next virtual presser, magandang tanghali po.